The blood on Vincent O'Malley's knuckles had barely dried when he first saw Natalie Granger step off the stagecoach in Placerville, California, her green eyes scanning the dusty street like she was searching for something she had lost long ago. It was July 1876, and the summer heat pressed down on the town like a heavy blanket. Vincent stood outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, nursing his bruised hand from the fight he had just finished. Some drifter had gotten too rough with one of the working girls, and Vincent had put a stop to it the way he always did when men crossed the line. He was not looking for trouble, but trouble seemed to find him anyway. That was the way of things in California's gold country, even though the rush had mostly died down years before. Natalie climbed down from the coach with careful steps, her blue traveling dress dusty from the long journey. She was 20 years old, and her auburn hair was pinned up beneath a simple bonnet. Behind her came a man in an expensive suit, maybe 40 years old, with silver streaks in his dark hair and a commanding presence that made people step aside. This was Douglas Pemberton, a wealthy mine owner from San Francisco, and everyone in Placerville knew his name even if they had never seen his face. Vincent watched as Pemberton helped Natalie down, his hand lingering on her waist longer than necessary. She smiled at him, but Vincent noticed it did not reach her eyes. There was something mechanical about the gesture, like she had practiced it 1,000 times until it became reflex rather than feeling. "That's Pemberton," said a voice beside him. Vincent turned to see his friend Jack Murphy, a fellow ranch hand who worked the same spread as Vincent about 5 miles outside town. "Word is he's bringing his intended bride to stay at the Grand Hotel while he finishes some business deals. Planning to marry her next month and take her back to San Francisco." Vincent nodded, taking in this information without much interest. Rich men and their brides were not his concern. He had his own life to worry about, working from dawn until dusk at the Riverside Ranch, saving what little money he could for the piece of land he hoped to buy someday. He was 23 years old, and he figured he had another decade of hard work before he could call anything his own. But something made him look at Natalie again. Maybe it was the way she held herself, with a kind of quiet dignity that seemed at odds with the nervous energy in her movements. Or maybe it was the way she glanced around Placerville with an expression that reminded him of a wild horse looking at a corral, measuring the height of the fence and wondering what lay beyond it. Pemberton guided her toward the Grand Hotel, his hand firm on her elbow. 2 men followed behind carrying her trunks. As they passed near Vincent, Natalie's eyes met his for just a moment. It was barely a second, but something passed between them, some wordless acknowledgement that made Vincent's chest tighten in a way he could not explain. Then she was gone, disappearing into the hotel, and Vincent was left standing in the street feeling like he had just missed something important. Over the next few days, Vincent tried to put Natalie Granger out of his mind. He had work to do, and spending time thinking about another man's woman was both foolish and dangerous. But Placerville was a small town, and he kept seeing her around. She would walk down Main Street with Pemberton, visiting the dress shop or the general store, always with that same practiced smile on her face. Pemberton talked constantly, gesturing with his hands as he pointed out various buildings and people, and Natalie nodded along like an obedient student learning her lessons. Vincent learned more about her situation from the gossip that flowed through the town like water through a sluice. Natalie was from a good family in Boston, but her father had died 2 years ago and left behind nothing but debts. Her mother had died when she was young. She had an older brother who had disappeared during the war, presumed dead. Douglas Pemberton had been a business associate of her father's, and when the old man died, Pemberton had paid off all the debts in exchange for Natalie's agreement to marry him. It was a common enough story in those days. Women had few options when it came to supporting themselves, and marriage to a wealthy man, even one twice your age, was considered a respectable solution to financial troubles. Nobody thought twice about it. Nobody except Vincent, who found himself growing angry every time he saw Pemberton's possessive hand on Natalie's arm. The situation might have stayed that way, with Vincent watching from a distance and Natalie going through the motions of her arranged life, except for what happened on a Friday evening 2 weeks after she arrived. Vincent had come into town to pick up supplies for the ranch. He was walking past the alley beside the hotel when he heard raised voices. One was Pemberton's, cold and sharp. The other was Natalie's, strained with barely controlled emotion. "I have given you everything," Pemberton was saying. "I paid every cent your father owed. I have treated you with nothing but generosity, and this is how you repay me, by questioning my decisions." "I only asked if we might delay the wedding," Natalie said, her voice shaking. "Just a few months to give me time to adjust to California, to get to know you better." "I do not think that is unreasonable." "Unreasonable," Pemberton laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What is unreasonable is your attitude, my dear. You seem to forget that you have no choices left. You agreed to this arrangement. Your honor depends on seeing it through. Unless you would prefer I tell everyone in Boston that Natalie Granger is the sort of woman who breaks her promises. That kind of reputation would follow you everywhere. You would never recover from it." There was a long silence. Vincent stood frozen in the street, knowing he should not be listening but unable to make himself move away. When Natalie spoke again, her voice was quieter, defeated. "No, I have not forgotten what I owe you." "Good. Then I expect no more of these conversations. We will be married on the date we agreed, and you will do your duty as my wife. I have been patient with you, Natalie, but my patience has limits. Do not test them." Vincent heard footsteps, and he quickly moved away from the alley, ducking into the general store before Pemberton could see him. Through the window, he watched the older man emerge and walk toward the saloon, his expression satisfied. A moment later, Natalie came out as well, but she turned the opposite direction, walking quickly toward the edge of town with her arms wrapped around herself despite the heat. Without thinking about it, Vincent followed her. He kept his distance, making sure she did not notice him, but he could not shake the feeling that she should not be alone. She walked past the last buildings and kept going, following a path that led up into the foothills where scattered pines grew among the rocks. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Natalie climbed until she reached a flat outcropping of rock that overlooked the town. Then she stopped and just stood there, looking out at the view. Her shoulders were shaking, and Vincent realized she was crying, trying to do it quietly so no one would hear. He should have left her alone. He knew that. But instead, he found himself climbing up to the outcropping, his boots scraping on the rock loud enough to announce his presence. Natalie spun around, her hand going to her throat in surprise. Her eyes were red, and she quickly wiped at her cheeks, trying to compose herself. "Who are you? Why are you following me?" "My name is Vincent O'Malley," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I work at the Riverside Ranch. I am sorry for startling you, miss. I was in town getting supplies when I saw you walking out here alone. It is getting dark, and there are mountain lions in these hills sometimes. I thought someone should make sure you were safe." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her deciding whether to believe him. Finally, some of the tension left her shoulders. "That is kind of you, but unnecessary. I can take care of myself." "I do not doubt that," Vincent said, "but it would ease my mind to walk you back to town when you are ready, whenever that might be. No hurry." Natalie turned back to the view, and for a while neither of them spoke. The silence stretched out, but it was not uncomfortable. Vincent leaned against a boulder and waited, watching the way the fading light caught in her hair. "It is beautiful here," Natalie said finally. "Different from Boston. Everything is so open, so wild. Back home, everything feels closed in. All those buildings pressed together. All those rules about how a lady should behave, what she should want, who she should be." She paused. "I thought coming west might feel like freedom, but I suppose you carry your cage with you, do not you, no matter how far you travel?" Vincent did not know what to say to that, so he just told her the truth. "I grew up in Missouri. Came west when I was 16, looking for something different. I have been working ranches ever since, saving money for my own place. It is hard work, and some days I am not sure I will ever get there. But I am free to try. That counts for something. Does it?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Vincent felt that same strange pull he had felt when their eyes first met. "Are you really free, Mr. O'Malley, or do you just have different chains than I do?" "I suppose everyone has something holding them back," Vincent admitted, "but there is a difference between chains you choose and chains someone else puts on you." Natalie's expression changed, becoming guarded. "You heard us, in the alley. There was no point in lying." "Yes, madam." "I did not mean to, but yes. And now you think you understand my situation." "No," Vincent said. "I do not pretend to understand what you are going through. I just know that no one should have to marry someone they do not want to marry. That is not right, no matter what debts are involved." "Right and wrong are luxuries for people with choices," Natalie said bitterly. "My father made his mistakes and now I pay for them. That is how the world works. It does not have to be." She laughed, but it was a sad sound. "What would you have me do? Run away with nothing but the clothes on my back? I have no money, no family, no skills that would allow me to support myself. Douglas has made it very clear what would happen if I broke our engagement. I would be ruined. No decent family would take me in. I would end up in a brothel or dead in a gutter somewhere. Those are my choices." Vincent wanted to argue, to tell her there had to be another way, but he knew she was right. The world was not kind to women who stepped outside the lines society drew for them. He had seen it himself, the women who ended up working in saloons or worse, their reputations destroyed, their options gone. "I am sorry," he said finally. "That is not much, but I am sorry you are in this position." Natalie was quiet for a moment, then she gave him a small, genuine smile. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face. "Thank you for that. Most people would tell me how fortunate I am to be marrying a man of Mr. Pemberton's standing. They would say I should be grateful." "Most people are fools," Vincent said, and that made her laugh again, more naturally this time. They talked a while longer as the stars came out overhead. Natalie told him about Boston, about her father's bookshop, and how she used to spend hours reading while she was supposed to be minding the counter. Vincent told her about his ranch work, about the satisfaction of a hard day's labor and the dream of having his own herd someday. It was easy to talk to her, easier than it should have been with a woman he barely knew. But there was something about the darkness and the isolation of the hillside that made confidences feel safe. Eventually, they walked back to town together. Vincent kept a proper distance between them, knowing that even being seen together could cause trouble for Natalie. When they reached the hotel, she paused at the entrance. "Thank you for tonight, Mr. O'Malley, for listening and for not judging me." "Vincent," he said. "And you have nothing to thank me for, Miss Granger." "Natalie," she replied. Then she slipped inside before he could say anything else. Vincent walked back through the dark streets to where he had left his horse, his mind churning. He knew he should forget about Natalie Granger, should let her live her life and make her own choices. But he could not shake the image of her standing on that rock outcropping, looking out at the wild country like a prisoner looking through bars. Over the next 2 weeks, Vincent and Natalie saw each other several more times, always in what appeared to be chance encounters. She would be walking down the street, and he would happen to be coming out of the feed store. She would be looking at fabrics in the dry goods shop, and he would come in to buy tobacco. They would exchange brief greetings, nothing that would raise eyebrows, but Vincent lived for those moments. He started finding excuses to come into town more often. The ranch foreman noticed but did not say anything, just gave Vincent a knowing look that made him feel like a fool. But Vincent could not help himself. He was falling in love with a woman he could not have, and he knew it was going to break his heart. The third time they met on the hillside overlooking town, it was Natalie who sought him out. Vincent had gone up there in the evening, drawn by the peace of the spot, and found her already sitting on the rock where they had first talked. She did not seem surprised to see him. "I have been coming here every evening," she said as he climbed up to join her, "hoping you might appear." Vincent's heart hammered in his chest. "Why?" "Because you are the only person in this town who sees me as something other than Douglas Pemberton's property," she said simply. "Because when I am with you, I feel like I can breathe. Is that wrong of me?" "I do not know," Vincent said honestly. He sat down beside her close enough that he could smell the lavender scent she wore. "Probably. But I have been hoping to see you two, so I am in no position to judge." They sat together as the sun went down, talking about everything and nothing. Natalie told him about the books she loved, the places she dreamed of seeing. Vincent told her about his plans for his ranch, how he wanted to raise horses instead of cattle, breed them for speed and intelligence. He had never told anyone about that dream before. It felt too fragile, too precious to share. But with Natalie, it felt safe. As the stars came out, Natalie shivered in the cooling air. Without thinking, Vincent shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. His fingers brushed her neck as he did, and she looked up at him with wide eyes. They were so close he could count her freckles, could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "Vincent," she whispered, and it was a question and an answer all at once. He kissed her. It was gentle and careful, giving her every chance to pull away, but she did not. Instead, she leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. The kiss deepened, and Vincent felt like he was falling off a cliff, tumbling into space with nothing to catch him. When they finally broke apart, Natalie was crying. "We cannot do this. I am engaged to be married." "To a man you do not love," Vincent said. "To a man who treats you like property." "That does not matter. I gave my word. My honor is all I have left. What about your happiness?" "Does that count for nothing?" "Happiness is a luxury I cannot afford," Natalie said, but she was still holding onto his shirt, still close enough that he could feel her breath on his face. "I cannot just walk away from this, Vincent. I have nowhere to go, no way to support myself. Douglas would ruin my reputation. He has friends everywhere, powerful friends. He would make sure I could never work, never find any respectable position. I would starve." Vincent took her hands in his. They were small and cold, and he wanted nothing more than to keep them warm forever. "What if you did not have to be alone? What if there was someone willing to help you, to stand by you? Vincent, you are a ranch hand. I do not mean that as an insult, but you have even less than I do. How could we possibly manage?" "I have been saving money," he said. "Not much, but enough for a start. There is land available east of here, cheaper than around Placerville. We could file a claim, build a small house. It would be hard work, and we would be poor for a while, but we would be free. We would be together." Natalie stared at him like he had just proposed they fly to the moon. "You are talking about running away together. You are asking me to ruin both our lives for a dream." "I am asking you to choose your own life instead of the one being forced on you," Vincent said. "I know it is crazy." I know we barely know each other, but I also know that what I feel when I am with you is real. It is more real than anything I have ever felt before, and I think you feel it too." She did not deny it. Instead, she pulled away from him, standing up and walking to the edge of the outcropping. "I need time to think. This is not a decision I can make in a moment of passion." "I understand," Vincent said, though his heart was sinking, "but you do not have much time. Your wedding is 3 weeks away." "I know," she said quietly. "Believe me, I know." They walked back to town in silence that night. Before Natalie went into the hotel, she turned to him. "I care for you, Vincent, more than I should, more than is wise. But caring for someone is not enough to build a life on. I have to think about the practical realities." "I know," Vincent said. "Just promise me you will really think about it. Promise me you will not just accept your fate because it seems easier than fighting." "I promise," she said, and then she was gone. The next 2 weeks were torture for Vincent. He saw Natalie only once, passing on the street, and she gave him a smile that told him nothing. Pemberton had stepped up the wedding preparations, and the whole town was talking about the celebration he was planning. He had bought out the entire hotel dining room for the reception, ordered champagne from San Francisco, hired a photographer to come all the way from Sacramento. It was going to be the social event of the season in Placerville. Vincent threw himself into work, trying to exhaust himself so he would not spend every waking moment thinking about Natalie. But it did not help. At night, lying in the bunkhouse listening to the other ranch hands snore, he stared at the ceiling and imagined different versions of the future. In some, Natalie chose him and they built a life together. In others, she married Pemberton and Vincent spent the rest of his life wondering what might have been. A week before the wedding, Jack Murphy found Vincent behind the barn, practicing with his revolver. It was something Vincent did sometimes when he needed to clear his head, the routine of drawing and aiming, a meditation of sorts. "You are going to wear that gun out," Jack said, leaning against the barn wall, "or shoot yourself in the foot." Vincent holstered the weapon without firing. "Just keeping in practice." "Right. And I am President Grant." Jack pulled out a flask and took a drink, then offered it to Vincent. "Everyone in town knows you have been seeing Pemberton's bride to be on the sly." Vincent's hand froze halfway to the flask. "That is not true. We have barely spoken." "Maybe so, but that does not stop people from talking. You have been mooning around after her like a lovesick calf, and people notice these things. More importantly, Pemberton notices. He had some of his men asking around about you yesterday. Where you work, where you are from, how much money you make." A chill ran down Vincent's spine. What did they want to know that for? What do you think? He sees you as a threat. He knows his little bride is not exactly enthusiastic about marrying him, and he is making sure there are no alternatives available to her. "If I were you, I would stay away from town until after the wedding, maybe permanently." "I cannot do that," Vincent said. "Yes, you can. You can and you should. Pemberton is dangerous, Vincent. He did not get rich by being nice. During the gold rush, he had rival miners beaten, their claims jumped. There were rumors he had at least 2 men killed, though nothing was ever proven. He has the law in his pocket and enough money to make problems disappear. You are a nobody with no connections and no protection. If you get in his way, he will crush you." Vincent took the flask and drank, the whiskey burning down his throat. "What kind of man would I be if I just walked away? If I let her marry him knowing what I know, a smart one, a living one." Jack took the flask back. "Look, I understand what you are feeling. She is a beautiful woman in a bad situation and you want to save her, but sometimes people do not want to be saved. Sometimes they just want to survive the best way they know how. You forcing yourself into this situation is not going to help her. It is only going to get you hurt." "Maybe," Vincent said, but I have to give her the choice. I have to let her know that there is another way, even if she decides not to take it. Jack shook his head. You are a damn fool, Vincent O'Malley, but I suppose that is why we are friends, fools of a feather and all that. Despite Jack's warning, Vincent went into town the next day. It was 6 days before the wedding, and Placerville was in a state of preparation. Banners were being hung, the hotel was being decorated, and everywhere Vincent looked there were reminders of the upcoming celebration. It made him sick to his stomach. He waited near the general store, hoping to catch Natalie during her daily errands, but hours passed without any sign of her. Finally, as the sun was starting to set, he saw her emerge from the hotel with an older woman he did not recognize. They walked together toward the dress shop, deep in conversation. Vincent followed at a distance, waiting for an opportunity. When the older woman went into the shop, leaving Natalie outside examining a display in the window, he made his move. "Natalie," he said quietly, stepping up beside her. She jumped, her hand going to her chest. "Vincent, you startled me. What are you doing here? I needed to see you. We need to talk." "We cannot. Mrs. Henderson is inside and she will be out any moment. She is Douglas's aunt and she watches me like a hawk." "Then meet me tonight, please." One last time. Natalie glanced at the shop window, then back at him. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the war between what she wanted and what she thought she should do. The hillside. Midnight. "But Vincent, this has to be the last time. After tonight we cannot see each other again." "I understand," he said, though his heart was breaking. "Midnight." She nodded and stepped away from him just as Mrs. Henderson emerged from the shop carrying a large box. The older woman gave Vincent a suspicious look, but Natalie smiled and took her arm, leading her down the street while chattering about something inconsequential. She did not look back. Vincent spent the rest of the evening in a state of nervous energy. He could not eat, could not sit still, could not focus on anything but the coming meeting. He had no idea what he was going to say to Natalie, how he was going to convince her to choose him over security, over respectability, over everything she had been taught a woman should want. At 11:30, he saddled his horse and rode into town. He left the animal tied near the base of the hill and climbed up to their meeting spot on foot, not wanting the sound of hooves to alert anyone. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light over the landscape. It was beautiful and eerie at the same time. Natalie was already there when he arrived. She stood at the edge of the outcropping in a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. The wind caught it, making it stream behind her like a banner. She looked like something out of a fairy tale, beautiful and untouchable. "I did not think you would come," Vincent said as he approached her. "I almost did not," she admitted. "This is madness, Vincent. What we are doing, what we feel for each other, it cannot end well. It can if we make it so. Come with me, Natalie. Tonight. Right now. We can ride east, get married in the next town, file for land under your new name. Pemberton would never find us." "He would find us," she said with certainty. "Men like Douglas always find what they are looking for, and when he did, he would destroy you. He has already been asking questions about you, did you know that? He knows we have been meeting. He knows you care for me." "I do not care what he knows or what he does to me," Vincent said fiercely. "All I care about is you. I love you, Natalie. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I love you more than I have ever loved anything in my life. I would rather have 1 year with you and spend the rest of my life running than live 50 years without you." Tears streamed down Natalie's face, silver in the moonlight. "I love you too. That is the terrible part. I love you and it changes nothing." "It changes everything," Vincent insisted. He closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "Love is the only thing that matters. Everything else, All the money and security and reputation in the world, it means nothing without love. You know that. I know you do. Loving you does not put food on the table or a roof over my head, Natalie said, but her voice was breaking. It does not protect me from being shunned by society or judged as a fallen woman. It does not make the hard reality of poverty any easier to bear. No, but it makes it worthwhile, Vincent said. I cannot promise you luxury or comfort. I cannot promise you an easy life. But I can promise that I will love you every single day. I will work until my hands bleed to provide for you. I will stand between you and anyone who tries to hurt you. I will spend every breath I have making you happy. Is not that worth something? Natalie was sobbing now, and Vincent pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, her whole body shaking with the force of her tears. He held her close, one hand stroking her hair, wishing he could take away her pain and her fear. I want to say yes, she whispered against his shirt. I want it so much it hurts, but I am terrified, Vincent. I am terrified of making the wrong choice, of ruining both our lives, of ending up alone and destitute with nothing but regrets. The wrong choice is marrying a man you do not love, Vincent said firmly. The wrong choice is spending the rest of your life wondering what might have been if you had just been brave enough to choose happiness. She pulled back to look up at him, her face wet with tears. And if we fail, if we cannot make it work, if we end up poor and miserable, then at least we will be poor and miserable together, Vincent said, and it made her laugh through her tears. But we will not fail. I will not let us fail. I will make this work, Natalie. I swear it on my life. For a long moment, she just looked at him, and Vincent could see the decision forming behind her eyes. He held his breath, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell was holding them in this moment. I need more time, she said finally. The wedding is in 6 days. Let me have until then to sort out my thoughts, to figure out what I am going to do. Please, Vincent, do not ask me to decide right now when my emotions are running so high. Let me think clearly. It was not the answer he wanted, but it was better than an outright refusal. All right, 6 days. But Natalie, if you decide to go through with the wedding, I need to know before. I cannot stand there and watch you marry him. It would kill me. I will send word, she promised. One way or another, before the wedding day, you will know my decision. They held each other for a while longer, neither wanting to let go, both knowing they had to. Finally, Natalie pulled away and started down the hill. Vincent watched her go, his heart heavy with uncertainty. The next 5 days were the longest of Vincent's life. He went through the motions of his work, but his mind was always elsewhere. Jack tried to distract him with talk of horses and gossip from town, but nothing helped. Every moment stretched out like hours, and Vincent found himself constantly calculating how much time was left. On the 5th day, with the wedding scheduled for the next afternoon, Vincent finally snapped. He could not take the waiting anymore. He had to know what Natalie had decided, had to see her one more time before everything became final. He rode into town that evening just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange that looked like blood and fire. The main street was quiet, most people inside having supper. Vincent tied his horse outside the hotel and stood there for a moment, gathering his courage. He had no plan, no real idea of what he was going to do. He just knew he could not let tomorrow come without making one final attempt to reach Natalie, to remind her that she had a choice. Before he could move, the hotel door opened and Pemberton himself stepped out. The older man stopped when he saw Vincent, his expression hardening into something cold and dangerous. "Mr. O'Malley," Pemberton said, his voice smooth as silk and just as deadly. "How convenient. I was hoping to have a word with you." Vincent's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but Pemberton held up a hand. No need for that. I simply want to have a civilized conversation. Walk with me. It was not really a question. Two large men had appeared from the shadows of the hotel porch, and Vincent recognized them as hired guns, the kind of men who solved problems with violence. He could draw on Pemberton, but he would be dead before his gun cleared leather. "All right," Vincent said. "Let us talk." They walked down the street together, Pemberton's guards following at a discreet distance. The mine owner led them to a quiet spot near the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land. "I am going to be direct with you, Mr. O'Malley," Pemberton said, stopping and turning to face Vincent. "You have been spending time with my fiancée. You have been filling her head with romantic notions and making an already difficult situation even more complicated. This ends now. With all due respect, sir, what is between Natalie and me is none of your business," Vincent said, knowing even as he said it that he was pushing his luck. Pemberton's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes, something that made Vincent's blood run cold. "Everything concerning Natalie is my business. She is mine, bought and paid for. I own her just as surely as I own my mines and my property, and I do not share what is mine." "She is not property," Vincent said, anger overriding his caution. "She is a human being with thoughts and feelings and the right to choose her own life. Her right to choose ended when she accepted my proposal and my money," Pemberton said coldly. "She made her decision. Now she has to live with it, as do you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope, holding it out to Vincent. "There is $500 in here, more money than you would make in 2 years of ranch work. Take it and leave Placerville. Go to Nevada, Oregon, anywhere but here. Start your new life somewhere else and forget you ever met Natalie Granger." Vincent looked at the envelope like it was a snake. "You think you can buy me off? I think you are a practical man who understands that some battles cannot be won. You have no money, no position, no way to provide for a woman like Natalie. I can give her everything she needs. You cannot. Take the money and go. It is the smart choice." "And if I refuse?" Pemberton's smile was thin and cold. "Then things become unpleasant. I would hate for there to be an accident before my wedding. A young man trampled by horses, perhaps, or shot during a robbery. These things happen in rough country, but they would not have to happen to you if you simply take my generous offer and leave." Vincent felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. "You would have me killed over this." "I would do whatever is necessary to protect what is mine," Pemberton said simply. "Do not mistake my civilized manners for weakness, Mr. O'Malley. I have killed better men than you for less reason. Make your choice." Vincent wanted to hit him, wanted to draw his gun and put a bullet between those cold eyes, but he knew that would be suicide. The two guards were watching closely, hands on their weapons. Even if Vincent managed to shoot Pemberton, he would be dead a second later. And dying would not help Natalie. "I need to think about it," Vincent said finally. "You have until tomorrow morning," Pemberton said. "My wedding is at 2 in the afternoon. If you are still in Placerville at noon, I will take that as your answer and we will proceed accordingly. Choose wisely, Mr. O'Malley. Your life depends on it." With that, Pemberton turned and walked back toward the hotel, his guards falling in behind him. Vincent stood alone in the gathering darkness, the envelope still in Pemberton's hand because he had refused to take it, his mind racing. He could leave. Part of him knew that was the smart choice. Take the implied threat seriously, ride out of town tonight and never look back. Save his own life and let Natalie live hers, even if it meant marrying a man who thought of her as property. But the thought of leaving her made him physically sick. How could he ride away knowing what he knew, feeling what he felt? How could he live with himself if he abandoned her to that fate? Vincent walked back to his horse. but instead of leaving town, he rode to the hillside overlooking Placerville. He sat on the rock outcropping where he and Natalie had shared so many conversations, looking down at the lights of the town below. The hotel was lit up bright, preparing for tomorrow's wedding. Somewhere in there, Natalie was probably lying awake, struggling with her own decision. He stayed there for hours, thinking about everything that had led him to this moment. He had come west looking for freedom, for the chance to build something of his own. He had worked hard, saved his money, dreamed his dreams. And then Natalie had stepped off that stagecoach and changed everything. Love was supposed to make you feel complete, was it not? But all Vincent felt was torn apart, pulled in different directions by duty and desire, practicality and passion. What was the right choice? He honestly did not know any more. As midnight approached, Vincent heard footsteps on the path below. He tensed, his hand going to his gun, but then a familiar voice called out softly, "Vincent, are you up there?" It was Natalie. Vincent stood up, his heart pounding. "I am here." She climbed up to join him, breathing hard from the effort. Even in the moonlight, he could see that she had been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked exhausted. "I saw you from my window," she said. "I could not sleep, and I was looking out at the stars, trying to find some kind of answer in them. Then I saw you riding up here. I had to come. Natalie, you should not be here if Pemberton finds out." "I do not care anymore," she said, and there was a fierce edge to her voice that Vincent had never heard before. "I am so tired of being afraid, Vincent. Tired of doing what everyone else thinks I should do. Tired of being treated like a possession instead of a person." Vincent reached for her, and she came into his arms willingly. They held each other tight, and for a moment nothing else mattered. Not Pemberton, not the wedding, not the impossible situation they were in. Just the two of them together, the way they were meant to be. "Pemberton threatened me tonight," Vincent said quietly. "Offered me money to leave town. Said if I do not go by noon tomorrow, there will be consequences." Natalie pulled back, her eyes wide with fear. "What are you going to do?" "I do not know," Vincent admitted. "I know I should go. It is the smart thing, the safe thing, but I cannot stand the thought of leaving you." "Then do not," Natalie said. "Stay, fight for me, help me find the courage to fight for myself." Vincent stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I do not want to marry Douglas Pemberton. I am saying I do not care about money or security or what society thinks I should do. I am saying I choose you, Vincent. I choose love. I choose freedom. I choose my own life, whatever that looks like." Joy flooded through Vincent, so intense it almost hurt. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there is no going back. Pemberton will make good on his threats. We will have to run, probably for a long time. Life will be hard." "I am sure," Natalie said firmly. "I have spent the last 5 days thinking about nothing else. I tried to convince myself to go through with the wedding, to be practical and sensible. But every time I imagined marrying Douglas, all I could feel was despair. And every time I imagined running away with you, all I could feel was hope." "That has to mean something, does it not?" "It means everything," Vincent said, and he kissed her with all the love and relief and joy he was feeling. She kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands tangling in his hair, and it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, Vincent's mind was already racing ahead, making plans. "We need to leave tonight. Right now, before anyone can stop us. I have my horse, and there is a farm outside town where I can buy another. We ride east to Sacramento, get married there, then keep going. Nevada, maybe, or Oregon, somewhere far enough away that Pemberton cannot reach us easily." "I have some jewelry," Natalie said. "My mother's things. They are not worth a fortune, but enough to help us get started. And I have a little money saved that Douglas does not know about." "Not much, but something." "That will help," Vincent said. "Go back to the hotel. Pack light, just what you can carry easily. Can you get out without being seen?" "There is a back stairs that the servants use. If I am careful, I can slip out that way. When should I meet you?" "Give me 2 hours to arrange for the second horse and gather supplies. There is an old barn about a mile east of town on the Sacramento Road. Do you know it?" "I think so. The one with the red door." "That is the one. Meet me there at 2 in the morning. If something goes wrong, if you cannot get away safely, do not take foolish risks. We will find another way." Natalie nodded, her expression determined. "I will be there. Nothing is going to stop me." They kissed one more time, long and sweet, sealing their decision. Then Natalie started back down the hill, moving quickly and quietly through the darkness. Vincent watched until she disappeared from view, then headed to where he had left his horse. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. Vincent rode to the farm he had mentioned and woke up the owner, a German immigrant named Klaus, who owed Vincent a favor from the previous year. Klaus grumbled about being roused in the middle of the night, but agreed to sell Vincent a sturdy mare for a fair price. Vincent also bought 2 weeks' worth of supplies, packing them carefully into saddlebags. By the time he rode to the old barn, it was nearly 2 in the morning. Vincent waited in the shadows, every nerve on edge, jumping at every sound. What if Natalie could not get away? What if she had been discovered? What if she had changed her mind? But then he saw her, a slim figure in a dark cloak hurrying down the road with a small carpet bag clutched in her hand. Relief washed over him, and he stepped out to meet her. "Thank God," Natalie breathed, throwing herself into his arms. "I was so afraid something would happen, that this was all a dream and I would wake up in the hotel." "It is real," Vincent assured her. "We are really doing this. Are you ready?" "I am ready," she said without hesitation. Vincent helped her onto the mare, then swung up onto his own horse. They rode east, away from Placerville, toward whatever future they could make together. The night was dark, but Vincent felt like they were riding toward the light. They pushed hard through the darkness, wanting to put as much distance as possible between themselves and Placerville before dawn. Vincent knew that once Natalie's absence was discovered, Pemberton would send men after them. The mine owner was not the type to let go of something he considered his, and he had both the money and the connections to mount a serious pursuit. As the sun rose, painting the Sierra Nevada foothills in shades of gold and pink, Vincent and Natalie stopped to rest the horses and eat a quick breakfast of hardtack and jerky. They were both exhausted, but there was an energy between them, an excitement that came from having finally made their choice. "No regrets?" Vincent asked as they sat together on a fallen log, sharing water from his canteen. "Not a single one," Natalie said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. Even if we end up poor and struggling, it will be better than the life I was about to live." They reached Sacramento in the late afternoon. The state capital was much larger than Placerville, bustling with activity. Vincent found them a small, discreet hotel on the edge of town where the proprietor did not ask too many questions. They took a room, and for the sake of propriety, Vincent told the clerk they were brother and sister traveling to visit family. The next morning, they found a justice of the peace willing to marry them. The ceremony was simple, with the justice's wife and clerk serving as witnesses. Vincent had no ring to give Natalie, but she did not seem to care. When the justice pronounced them man and wife, Vincent kissed her softly, and the weight of the world seemed to lift from his shoulders. She was his now, legally and officially, and whatever happened next, they would face it together. They stayed in Sacramento for 2 days, just long enough for Vincent to sell some of Natalie's jewelry, and for them to rest and make plans. Vincent bought a map and studied it carefully, trying to decide where they should go. They needed somewhere far from Pemberton's influence, but with enough opportunity for a man to make a living. "What about Oregon?" Natalie suggested as they pored over the map together in their hotel room. "I have heard the land is good there, and it is far enough from California that Douglas might not think to look for us there immediately." "Oregon could work," Vincent agreed. "The problem is getting there. We would have to go through rough country, and it is getting late in the year. The mountain passes could start getting snow soon." "What about Nevada then? Or Colorado?" Vincent traced possible routes with his finger. "Nevada is closer. There are mining towns there where I could find work while we save money for land. It is not as far from Pemberton as I would like, but it might be our best option given the time of year." They decided on Nevada, aiming for Virginia City, which was booming with silver mines. It would not be easy, but Vincent knew he could find work there, and the constant flow of newcomers would help them blend in. They bought additional supplies, traded Vincent's horse for a stronger one, and set out the next morning. The journey to Nevada took almost 2 weeks. They traveled carefully, always watchful for any sign of pursuit. At night, they made cold camps without fires, not wanting to advertise their location. It was hard traveling, but Natalie never complained. She rode as many hours as Vincent did, helped set up camp, and kept her spirits up even when they were both exhausted. During those long days on the trail, Vincent and Natalie talked about everything. Their hopes and dreams, their fears and doubts, the lives they had left behind, and the life they hoped to build. Vincent learned about Natalie's childhood, her love of books and learning, the way her father used to let her help in the bookshop, even though it was not considered proper for a young lady. Natalie learned about Vincent's family back in Missouri, the younger sister he had not seen in 7 years, his plans for breeding horses. They also grew comfortable with each other in other ways. Their wedding night had been tentative and sweet, both of them nervous and uncertain. But as the days passed, they learned each other's bodies, discovered what brought pleasure and comfort. The physical intimacy deepened the emotional connection between them, and Vincent found himself falling more in love with his wife with each passing day. They arrived in Virginia City in early September. The town was chaotic and crowded, perched on the side of a mountain with buildings stacked haphazardly wherever they could find purchase. The streets were loud with the sounds of commerce, and the stamp mills processing ore echoed like thunder. It was rough and dirty and perfect for 2 people who needed to disappear. Vincent found them a small room in a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, who had come over from China during the railroad construction, and stayed when her husband died in a mining accident. She asked no questions about Vincent and Natalie's past, just named her price, and showed them to a room that was barely big enough for a bed and a trunk, but was clean and secure. Vincent immediately started looking for work. The mines were always hiring, but that kind of labor was backbreaking and dangerous. Instead, Vincent talked his way into a job at one of the stables in town, leveraging his experience with horses and his genuine love for the animals. The pay was not great, but it was steady, and it did not involve spending 12 hours a day underground breathing rock dust. Natalie, meanwhile, discovered that Virginia City had a hunger for education. Many of the miners and merchants who had struck it rich wanted their children to have proper schooling, but teachers were in short supply. When Natalie mentioned to Mrs. Chen that she was well-read and had helped teach Sunday school back in Boston, the older woman immediately introduced her to several families who were desperate for a tutor. Within a month, Natalie had 5 regular students, children of successful mine owners and merchants. She taught them reading, writing, arithmetic, and history in their homes, earning decent money that supplemented Vincent's wages. It was not the life either of them had imagined, but it was theirs, built by their own efforts and choices. As fall turned to winter, Vincent began to relax slightly. They had been in Virginia City for 3 months with no sign of Pemberton or his men. Maybe the mine owner had decided they were not worth the effort to track down. Maybe he had been embarrassed enough by being left at the altar that he wanted to forget the whole thing. Or maybe he was just biding his time. Vincent tried not to think about that last possibility too much. He focused instead on his life with Natalie, on the joy of coming home to her each evening, of sharing meals and conversation and plans for the future. They were saving every penny they could, dreaming of the day when they could leave Virginia City and find that piece of land where Vincent could raise his horses, and Natalie could have a garden and maybe, eventually, children. It was a cold December evening when their fragile peace shattered. Vincent was walking home from the stable, looking forward to the supper Natalie had promised to make, when he noticed a man watching him from across the street. The man was well dressed for Virginia City, too clean and polished to be a miner, and there was something about the way he looked at Vincent that set off alarm bells. Vincent did not confront him, just continued walking home at a normal pace, but his hand stayed close to his gun. When he reached the boarding house, he took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into their room. Natalie looked up from the book she was reading, startled. "Vincent, what is wrong? We need to leave," he said, already pulling their trunk out and starting to pack. "Tonight, right now." "Why?" "What happened?" "I saw one of Pemberton's men. I am sure of it. He was watching the stable, watching me. He knows we are here." The color drained from Natalie's face, but she did not panic. Instead, she stood up and started helping him pack, moving quickly and efficiently. "Where will we go?" "North. Idaho, maybe, or Montana. Somewhere even more remote than this. We can figure out the details once we are moving." They were almost finished packing when they heard heavy footsteps on the stairs outside. Vincent's hand went to his gun, and he positioned himself between Natalie and the door. The footsteps stopped outside their room, and then someone knocked, hard and insistent. "Vincent O'Malley, I know you are in there. Open up. I just want to talk." It was not Pemberton's voice. This was someone younger with a slight accent that Vincent could not place. He met Natalie's eyes, and she nodded, moving behind him into the corner of the room. "What do you want?" Vincent called through the door. "Like I said, just to talk. I have a message from Mr. Pemberton." "Deliver it through the door." There was a pause, then the voice said, "Mr. Pemberton is willing to offer you a deal. He knows you are struggling financially. He knows you are living in one room in a boarding house and working for barely enough to survive. He is prepared to be generous. $10,000. And a signed document releasing Miss Granger from all obligations to him. In exchange, he wants Mrs. O'Malley to meet with him once, just once, to explain herself and apologize for the embarrassment she caused him. After that, you will be free to live your lives however you see fit." Vincent's gut told him it was a trap, but the offer was tempting enough to give him pause. $10,000 was a fortune, enough to buy good land and stock it with horses, enough to build the life he and Natalie dreamed of. And if Pemberton was willing to sign a document releasing Natalie from their engagement, that would provide legal protection they currently did not have. "What do you think?" he asked Natalie quietly. She shook her head firmly. "It is a lie. Douglas does not forget slights, and he does not forgive. If I agree to meet with him, I will never come back." Vincent trusted her judgment. She knew Pemberton better than he did. "No deal," he called through the door. "Tell Pemberton to leave us alone." "That would be unwise, Mr. O'Malley." "Mr. Pemberton is a patient man, but his patience is not infinite. Take the deal. It is the best offer you are going to get. The answer is no. Now leave before I put a bullet through this door." There was a long silence, then the sound of footsteps retreating down the stairs. Vincent waited, gun drawn, but no one else came. Finally, he moved to the window and looked out carefully. He could see 3 men standing in the street below, talking. After a moment, they dispersed in different directions. "They are not going to give up," Natalie said, her voice shaking slightly. "Douglas has found us once. He will find us again, no matter where we run." "Then we keep running," Vincent said. "We stay ahead of him until he gets tired of chasing us." "What if he never gets tired? What if we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders?" Vincent had no answer for that. He just pulled her close and held her, wishing he could promise her safety, but knowing he could not. They left Virginia City that night, slipping out the back of the boarding house and making their way to the stable. Vincent hated leaving without giving notice or saying goodbye to Mrs. Chen, but there was no choice. They saddled their horses and rode north, guided by moonlight and fear. Over the next 6 months, they moved constantly. Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado. Vincent found work where he could, usually with horses or cattle, never staying long enough to put down real roots. Natalie tutored when opportunities arose, but more often she helped Vincent with whatever work he was doing, learning skills she never would have learned back in Boston. It was a hard life, always moving, never secure, but it was also oddly freeing. Stripped of everything except each other, Vincent and Natalie discovered a deep partnership that went beyond romance. They were true companions, facing every challenge together, depending on each other in ways that would have been impossible in the more rigidly defined world they had left behind. They also discovered that Natalie was pregnant. It was early April 1877 when she told Vincent, and despite the uncertain circumstances, he was overjoyed. The thought of a child, of building a family with Natalie, made everything they had been through feel worthwhile. But it also made their situation more urgent. They could not keep running forever, not with a baby on the way. Vincent needed to find a place where they could settle, at least for a while, somewhere safe enough to have and raise a child. They ended up in a small settlement called Silverthorne in the Colorado Rockies. It was barely a town, just a cluster of buildings serving the ranches and small mines scattered through the mountains. But it was remote and quiet, and the people who lived there were the type who did not ask too many questions about a young couple's past. Vincent found work at a ranch run by a man named Tom Wheeler, who was getting too old to handle all the work himself and needed help with his small herd and the horse breeding operation he ran on the side. When Vincent demonstrated his knowledge and skill with horses, Tom offered him not just a job but a partnership. Tom would provide the land and the initial stock. Vincent would provide the labor and expertise, and they would split the profits. It was the opportunity Vincent had been dreaming of, the chance to finally work toward his goal of breeding horses. He and Natalie rented a small cabin on Tom's property, and for the first time in months, Vincent felt like they might actually be able to build a life instead of just surviving. Natalie was 6 months pregnant when Pemberton finally caught up to them. It was a warm July evening, and Vincent was in the corral working with a young stallion he was training. Natalie was in the cabin, and Tom had ridden into town for supplies. Vincent was completely focused on the horse, so he did not hear the riders approaching until they were almost at the fence. He looked up to see 3 men on horseback. One of them was Douglas Pemberton himself, looking out of place in his fine suit and polished boots. The other 2 were the same hired guns who had been with him back in Placerville, their expressions cold and professional. Vincent's hand moved to his gun, but Pemberton held up a hand. "Please, Mr. O'Malley, there is no need for violence. I simply want to talk to my runaway bride." "She is not your bride," Vincent said, keeping the corral fence between himself and the men. "She is my wife, legally married. You have no claim on her." "I have the claim of a contract and a debt paid," Pemberton said. His voice was calm, but there was anger simmering beneath it. "Natalie's father owed me $10,000. I paid that debt in exchange for her promise to marry me. She broke that promise. In the business world, we call that theft. In the real world, we call it escaping a prison," Vincent shot back. "Natalie did not want to marry you. She was coerced into it. That makes the contract invalid. That is for a court to decide. I want my property returned, Mr. O'Malley. Send Natalie out so we can discuss this like reasonable adults." "Not a chance. You want to talk to my wife, you do it through me." Pemberton's expression hardened. "I am trying to be civilized about this, but my patience is exhausted. I have spent nearly a year and a considerable amount of money tracking you down. I will not leave empty-handed. Now send Natalie out, or my men will go in and get her." Vincent drew his gun, pointing it at Pemberton. "First man who tries to enter that cabin gets a bullet." The two hired guns drew their own weapons, but Pemberton waved them down. "You cannot win this fight, Mr. O'Malley. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Be smart. Let me speak to Natalie." "I promise I will not harm her." "Your promises mean nothing," Vincent said. But he was calculating odds in his head, and they were not good. He might get one shot off, maybe two, but then he would be dead, and Natalie would be defenseless. He needed time, needed to figure out a strategy that did not end with him face down in the dirt. Before he could decide what to do, the cabin door opened and Natalie stepped out. Her pregnancy was obvious now, her belly round beneath her simple dress. She looked at Pemberton without fear, her chin lifted defiantly. "Douglas," she said, her voice steady, "you should not have come here." Pemberton stared at her pregnant form, his face going through several emotions before settling on cold fury. "You are with child, his child." "Yes," Natalie said. "I am carrying my husband's baby, our baby. Whatever connection you think you had to me is long over, Douglas. I am not your property, I never was. I am sorry for breaking our engagement, truly I am. I know it embarrassed you. But I could not marry a man I did not love when I had found real love with Vincent." "Love," Pemberton repeated, and he laughed bitterly. "You gave up security and comfort and position for love. You threw away everything I offered you to live in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, pregnant and probably poor. That is the most foolish thing I have ever heard." "Maybe it is foolish," Natalie agreed. "But it is my choice to make, my life to live. You need to let me go, Douglas. There is nothing for you here." For a moment, Pemberton just looked at her and Vincent could see him struggling with himself. Then the mine owner shook his head. "No, I do not accept that. You owe me, Natalie. Your father owed me, and when he died, that debt passed to you. I paid it in good faith, expecting certain things in return. I may not be able to force you to marry me now, but I can and will seek restitution. I will sue you for breach of contract. I will ruin your reputation so thoroughly that you will never be able to hold your head up in polite society again. And I will make sure every business owner and ranch in 3 territories knows that Vincent O'Malley is a man who steals other men's property. By the time I am done, neither of you will be able to find work anywhere in the West." "Then do it," Vincent said, moving to stand beside Natalie and taking her hand. "Ruin us if that makes you feel better, but we are not going anywhere with you and you are not taking Natalie. That is final." Pemberton's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Vincent thought the man was going to order his guns to start shooting. But then they heard the sound of hoofbeats, and Tom Wheeler came riding up the path with 3 other ranchers from the area. They all carried rifles, and their expressions made it clear whose side they were on. "Heard you might have some trouble, Vincent," Tom said casually, but his rifle was pointed in Pemberton's general direction. "Thought we would ride over and see if you needed any help." Pemberton looked at the ranchers, then back at Vincent and Natalie. He was smart enough to know he was outmaneuvered. "This is not over," he said coldly. "You have not heard the last from me." "Yeah, we have," Tom said. "Because if you come back here bothering these good people, you are going to find yourself at the bottom of a ravine, and it will be ruled an unfortunate accident. We take care of our own out here, and Vincent and Natalie are ours. You are not. So ride out while you still can and do not come back." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then Pemberton jerked his horse's reins, turning the animal back the way he had come. His 2 hired guns followed, and the 3 of them rode away, disappearing down the mountain trail. Vincent felt Natalie sag against him, all her brave front collapsing now that the danger had passed. He put his arm around her, supporting her weight. "It is all right," he murmured. "They are gone. We are safe." "Are we?" Natalie asked, her voice barely a whisper. "He meant what he said, Vincent. He is going to come after us legally. He has the money and the connections to make our lives very difficult." "Let him try," Tom said, climbing down from his horse. "I have been ranching in Colorado for 20 years. I know a lot of people, including some judges and a senator. If Pemberton wants to start legal trouble, he will find he has bitten off more than he can chew. Besides, a jury is not going to side with some rich California mine owner trying to force a woman to honor a marriage contract she entered under duress. Not when that woman is clearly happy with her husband and expecting their child." Vincent looked at Tom with gratitude. "Thank you for coming when you did and for what you just said. I do not know how to repay you." "You already are," Tom said. "You are doing good work with the horses, better work than I ever managed on my own. That is payment enough. Now get your wife inside and let her rest. She has had enough excitement for one day." Vincent took Natalie inside, and she collapsed on their bed, trembling with reaction. He lay down beside her, pulling her close, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "I am sorry," he said. "I am so sorry you have to deal with this. If I had known what kind of trouble staying with me would cause." "Do not," Natalie interrupted, putting her hand over his mouth. "Do not apologize for loving me. Do not apologize for giving me the chance to choose my own life. Yes, it has been hard. Yes, I am scared. But I would rather be scared with you than safe and miserable with Douglas. Do you understand that?" Vincent nodded, pulling her hand away so he could kiss her palm. "I understand. And I promise you, Natalie, I will protect you and our baby. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, I will keep you safe." "I know you will," she said, and she smiled at him, that genuine smile he loved so much. "We will keep each other safe. That is what partners do." Over the next 2 months, Vincent waited for the legal hammer to fall, for lawsuits and writs, and all the trouble Pemberton had promised. But nothing happened. It was like the mine owner had disappeared, and Vincent began to hope that maybe Tom's threats had worked, that Pemberton had decided the fight was not worth it. Then, in late September, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Natalie, and the return address was San Francisco. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery covered in Pemberton's precise handwriting. Vincent watched Natalie's face as she read it, saw her eyes widen with surprise. "What does it say?" he asked. "He is letting me go," she said, sounding stunned. "Douglas is releasing me from any obligation related to my father's debts. He says he has realized that trying to force someone to fulfill a promise made under duress is beneath him. He says he wishes us well and asks that we never contact him again." Vincent took the letter and read it himself, looking for traps or tricks, but it seemed genuine. Why would he do this? "I think Tom scared him more than we realized," Natalie said. Or maybe he just decided we were not worth the effort. Or maybe there is a shred of decency in him that finally won out. Does it matter? We are free, Vincent. Really, truly free. It seemed too good to be true, but as weeks and then months passed with no further contact from Pemberton, Vincent began to believe it. They were finally safe. The past was finally behind them. Their son was born in November, a cold, snowy night when the midwife almost could not make it through the drifts to the cabin. But she arrived in time, and after hours of labor, Natalie delivered a healthy baby boy with a good set of lungs and his father's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Tom Wheeler, and the old rancher cried when they told him, claiming it was just the cold wind making his eyes water. Watching Natalie hold their son for the first time, Vincent felt a sense of completion he had never experienced before. This was what he had been working toward, what all the struggle and fear and hardship had been for. Not just his own dreams, but a family, a real home, a life built on love instead of obligation or convenience. Over the next few years, Vincent and Natalie's life in Silverthorne settled into a comfortable rhythm. The partnership with Tom flourished, and Vincent's skill with horse breeding brought in good money. They bought their own piece of land adjacent to Tom's ranch, built a real house instead of living in the cabin, and started their own small herd. Natalie continued tutoring, teaching the children of local ranchers and miners, and became known throughout the area as the school teacher who could help even the most reluctant student learn to love books. She also started writing letters to newspapers in Denver and San Francisco, arguing for women's rights and education reform, and some of her letters were published, bringing her a small measure of fame in progressive circles. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Elizabeth and another son named William. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Elizabeth was wild and adventurous, always climbing trees and catching frogs and driving her mother to distraction. William was the baby, sweet and gentle, content to sit with a book while his siblings ran around. Vincent never forgot those early days of fear and running, never took for granted the peace they had found. But as the years passed, the memories faded into something like a story he had heard once, about 2 young people who loved each other enough to risk everything. It seemed almost impossible that he had been that desperate young man, that Natalie had been that scared young woman. It was April 1886, 10 years after they had run away together, when Vincent got word that Douglas Pemberton had died. A mining accident in one of his own facilities, crushed when a tunnel collapsed. It was noted in the newspaper as a tragic loss of a prominent businessman, and there was a large funeral in San Francisco, attended by all the important people of California society. Vincent showed the newspaper to Natalie, and they looked at it together in silence for a long moment. "I should feel something," Natalie said finally. "Relief or satisfaction or even grief, but I just feel empty. He was such a large presence in my life, and now he is just gone." "He was never really in your life," Vincent said. "Not the life that mattered. He was a shadow, a threat, a might have been. But this, us, our children, our home, this is your real life. He has no place in it." Natalie nodded, and they burned the newspaper in the fireplace, watching Pemberton's obituary curl and blacken and turn to ash. Then they went outside to where their children were playing in the spring sunshine, and they sat together on the porch swing Vincent had built, watching their family and feeling grateful for every moment. More years passed. Thomas grew up and took over most of the horse breeding operation, showing an instinct for the work that exceeded even Vincent's. He married a girl from town, a blacksmith's daughter named Sarah, and they had 3 children of their own. Elizabeth went to college in Denver, scandalizing half the community and making the other half proud, and came back with a teaching certificate and plans to open a real school in Silverthorne. William studied medicine and set up a practice serving the scattered ranches and mines of the area, traveling to patients who could never afford to go to a city doctor. Vincent and Natalie watched their children build their own lives with pride and occasional terror. They grew older together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming rough and weathered from years of work. But the love between them never faded. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared history and partnership. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Vincent arranged a surprise for Natalie. He took her back to California, to Placerville, the town where they had first met. It had changed over the years, become more settled and civilized, but the bones of it were still the same. They stood on the hillside overlooking the town, the same spot where they had talked so many times when Natalie was engaged to Pemberton, and Vincent was just a lovesick cowboy with more hope than sense. "You remember standing here and telling me you had no choices?" Vincent asked, putting his arm around his wife. "I remember," Natalie said, leaning into him. "I remember thinking I was trapped, that my whole life was already decided and all I could do was endure it. And then you showed me there was another way. You taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose your own happiness, even when everyone tells you it is impossible." Vincent pulled her close, and they stood there watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal a gold ring set with a single small diamond, nothing extravagant but beautiful in its simplicity. "Vincent, what is this?" "It is the ring I should have given you 30 years ago when we got married. I could not afford anything back then, but I always meant to get you one when I could. So here it is, 30 years late but no less sincere. Natalie O'Malley, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave up everything to take a chance on a poor cowboy with nothing but dreams. You have given me 30 years of love and partnership and joy. Thank you for choosing me." Natalie was crying as Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger beside the simple gold band she had worn since their wedding day. "I would choose you again," she said. "Every single time, in every possible world, I would choose you." They kissed as the sun set over Placerville, two people who had risked everything for love and found it was worth it. Around them, the Wild West that had shaped their youth was fading, being tamed and civilized, but the spirit that had brought them together was still alive, burning as bright as it had that night when a young woman ran to a cowboy waiting in the rain and said the words that changed everything. Because even though the rain was not literal on that hillside 30 years ago, Vincent had been waiting for her, waiting with hope and fear and desperate love. And when Natalie had come to him, making her choice, it had been as much a leap of faith as running through any storm. They had been through their own kind of storm, the chaos and danger and uncertainty of building a life on their own terms. But they had come through it together, hand in hand, and that made all the difference. Now, as they grew old together, surrounded by children and grandchildren, watching the world change and knowing they had played their small part in making it a little better, a little kinder, a little more free, Vincent and Natalie could look back with no regrets. It was the spring of 1907 when Vincent O'Malley passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. He had been working with the horses right up until the day before, teaching his youngest grandson how to gentle a skittish mare. That night, he had dinner with Natalie, told her he loved her like he did every single day, and went to bed. He simply did not wake up. Natalie grieved, but it was the grief of someone who had been blessed with a full and complete love. not the grief of something cut short or left unsaid. She had told Vincent every day how much she loved him. He had known, without doubt, that he was cherished. That was all anyone could ask for. She lived 3 more years, those years spent with her children and grandchildren, telling them stories of the old days, of the Wild West when everything seemed possible and love was worth any risk. She told them about the young cowboy who had waited for her, who had given her the courage to choose her own life. She told them about running away in the night, about building a life from nothing, about love that lasted through every hardship. When Natalie passed in 1910, at the age of 77, her family buried her next to Vincent on their land in Colorado, beneath a pair of pine trees they had planted when they first bought the property. On the shared headstone, their children carved a simple inscription, "Vincent and Natalie O'Malley he waited. She chose. They loved, and that in the end was the whole story. Everything else was just details." Their children and grandchildren continued the horse breeding operation, building it into one of the most respected in Colorado. Elizabeth's school grew and thrived, educating generations of mountain children. William's medical practice expanded, training younger doctors to serve the rural communities. Thomas's horses won prizes at fairs across the West. But more than any of that, Vincent and Natalie's descendants carried forward the lesson of their love story. That you have the right to choose your own life, that true partnership is worth more than security. That love, real love, is the foundation on which everything else worth having is built. Years later, one of their great-granddaughters, researching family history, found letters between Vincent and Natalie from those early days. Letters written during the months they were running, when they would sometimes have to separate briefly for safety, and would write to each other care of general delivery at remote post offices. The letters were love letters, but they were also letters of partnership and planning and mutual respect. Vincent wrote about his dreams and asked for Natalie's thoughts on them. Natalie wrote about books she had read and ideas she had, treating Vincent as an intellectual equal even though he had far less formal education. They wrote about practical matters, about money and routes and safe places, making decisions together even when apart. Reading those letters, the great-granddaughter understood what had made Vincent and Natalie's love last. It was not just passion, though that was certainly there. It was respect, true respect, each seeing the other as a whole, complete person with thoughts and dreams and agency. In an era when women were often treated as property or children, Vincent had seen Natalie as a partner. And Natalie had chosen him not because he was rich or powerful, but because he saw her for who she really was. That great-granddaughter published the letters in a book about pioneer women, and they became part of a larger story about the West, about how it was built not just by rugged individuals but by partnerships, by people who chose each other and worked together to carve out lives on harsh land. The old Riverside Ranch where Vincent had worked when he first came to Placerville eventually became a historical site, and guides told tourists about the cowboy who had fallen in love with a woman engaged to someone else, who had risked everything to give her a choice. It became a romantic story, polished and simplified in the retelling, but at its heart, it remained true, because the truth was this. In July 1876, a young woman named Natalie Granger had stepped off a stagecoach in Placerville, California, believing her life was already decided. And a young cowboy named Vincent O'Malley had taken one look at her and known that his life was about to change. They had found each other at exactly the right moment, when both were ready to be brave enough to choose love over security, freedom over obligation, their own path over the one society expected them to follow. It had not been easy. There had been danger and fear and hardship. There had been times when they had gone to bed hungry, times when they had wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. But through it all, they had each other. They had chosen each other, deliberately and consciously, and that choice had been reaffirmed every single day of their lives together. In the end, that was what made their story worth telling. Not the drama of running away or the threat of the villain pursuing them, but the simple, profound truth that love, real love, is a choice. A choice you make once in a moment of courage, and then keep making, over and over, through all the days of your life. Vincent had waited for Natalie on that hillside so many times, waited with hope and love and the offer of a different life. And when she had finally come to him, when she had said those 3 words, "I choose you," she had not just been choosing a man. She had been choosing herself, her own agency, her own right to determine her own fate. That was the real love story. Not a woman being saved by a man, but a woman and a man choosing to save themselves together, choosing to build something new and true, and entirely their own. And it all started with a choice, made on a hillside overlooking a California town, when a young woman looked at a young cowboy and saw not just love, but possibility. The possibility of a different kind of life, a different kind of future, a different kind of love than the one the world had tried to force on her. She chose possibility. She chose freedom. She chose love, and that made all the difference. Their story became part of the larger tapestry of the American West, one thread among millions, but no less important for being singular. Because every great movement, every social change, every step toward a more just and free world happens one choice at a time. One woman saying no to what she does not want and yes to what she does. One man seeing a woman as an equal partner instead of property. One couple deciding to build their life on love and respect instead of obligation and convention. Vincent and Natalie O'Malley did not change the world. But they changed their world, and the world of their children and their grandchildren, and everyone who heard their story and understood that you do not have to accept the life others plan for you. You can choose. It might be hard. It might be scary. It might require more courage than you think you possess, but you can choose. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, there will be someone waiting for you when you do. Someone who sees you for who you really are, who respects your right to make your own decisions, who wants to build a life with you rather than for you. That was Vincent and Natalie's gift to each other, and to all who came after them. The knowledge that love is not about possession or obligation, but about partnership and choice. The understanding that true romance is not about grand gestures or being swept off your feet, but about finding someone who will stand beside you, year after year, through whatever comes. And if that someone happens to be a cowboy waiting in the rain, metaphorical or otherwise, ready to offer you not just his heart but his respect and his partnership, and his unwavering support as you become who you were meant to be, well, that is the beginning of a love story worth living. And worth remembering, long after the protagonists are gone, as a reminder of what love can be when it is chosen freely and honored daily. As a promise that somewhere, always, there is someone willing to wait for you to find your courage. And that when you do, when you run to them through whatever storm and say those transformative words, "I choose you," you are not just beginning a relationship. You are beginning a revolution, one heart at a time. That was what Vincent and Natalie understood, what they lived every day of their long marriage. Love was not the ending of their story. It was the beginning of everything that mattered. And what a beautiful beginning it was.